Welcome back, everyone, and we're delighted again to welcome back the amazing Wimbush to do part 2 of his journey from cinema and to Unreal and incorporating elements. And so if you were here yesterday, or if you saw the stream yesterday, then Wimbush ran through that first part. So this is the connecting piece, as I understand it. So like taking it to the next step.
Part 2.
Fantastic. Yes. Excellent. So please take it away.
Thank you, Simon. So I'm gonna give everybody a second in case they want to take down my social medias here. But yeah, what up? Wimbush here, and I'm excited to bring you guys part 2 of my presentation I started yesterday. For those that don't know me real quick, my name is Jonathan Wimbush. I'm a motion graphics artist based out of Southern California. I've worked with Marvel, DC, Warner Brothers. Started off my journey interning under Adam Sandler over at Happy Madison, working on like House Buddy, Mall Cop, all those fun things over there. I've done a couple of video games, Lego Batman 2, Lego Harry Potter, and then a lot of XR stuff with VR and AR as well. And so if you want to follow me on social media, I'm most known for my YouTube channel, which I will pull up right now. And so my YouTube channel is youtube.com/Jonathan Wimbush, where I did like maybe 3 to 4 years worth of free tutorials. I do tutorials every single week. I cover programs such as the Red Giant Suite, Cinema 4D, Unreal Engine, After Effects, Photoshop, etc. Basically anything that has to do with motion graphics. That's what I've been covering weekly on my channel. And most recently, I teamed up with EJ, aka iDesign, and we're actually running a contest that's going to end on September 1st, or yeah, September 1st. You can find the details on my YouTube channel as well. And EJ is going to come up afterwards because he comes on directly after me, and we're just going to talk a little bit about it. So I don't want to get too much into that. I'm going to get into the presentation right now. So if you guys missed yesterday, I'm just going to do like a quick recap of what we were building. And so actually, let me pull open my scene instead of Unreal Engine 5 real quick. I should have actually pulled that up first, but I can show you guys in Cinema while that is loading. And so the whole premise of this demonstration was we were building out like a fantasy scene, like for those that are fans of video games like The Legend of Zelda, Borderlands. We were creating like this fantasy video game type scene using like cell shading and other techniques. First building it inside of Cinema 4D and then bringing it into Unreal Engine, where we're going to do further polish. We're going to do foliage. We're going to have reactive water. We're going to have dynamic lighting happening in Unreal Engine as well. And then I'm going to build out a larger landscape inside of Cinema 4D, which we're going to transfer over using a technique that I've recently come up with using height maps. You can bake height maps out of Cinema 4D and also bring those into Unreal Engine. But this is the scene that we are building out. This is something that I built out last week, but we've been building this from scratch starting yesterday. So if I actually pull into my camera here and just play my scene through, you can see that we have like some really cool sketching tune going on all in real time here. We pull up to like the Power Stone. We have Link's sword sitting inside the stone, and it's just a really simple scene. But today what we're going to do, like I built out my hero scene here, and today I'm going to show you guys how we could do like this interactive water. We have dynamic trees moving with the wind and everything. We have dynamic grass moving as well, and then we have like this giant landscape back here, which we're going to build that inside of Cinema 4D. And so I'm going to get started by actually, I'm going to close that down, and let's get started inside of Cinema 4D building out the height map, since that's what we were just talking about. So I'm going to start a brand new scene here. And what I'm going to do is actually bring in the terrain again. Like I said yesterday, I really love using the landscape terrains inside of Cinema 4D. It gives me some really cool procedural landscapes that I could just bring into Unreal very easy. I'm not going to worry about the size here. What I'm going to do is actually come down to here where it says border at sea level, and I'm going to click that off just so we get like some really bumpy terrain in here and everything. And I'm going to bring up my segments maybe to like 400 by 400. Because the more polygons we have, the better whenever we bring this into Unreal. We could probably smooth this out with the fine furrows. I'll bring this down to like 0. And then maybe for rough furrows, we'll do something simple like this. And so this is basically what I'm going to bring in using only the height map data. It's not going to be a FBX or a model or anything. I'm just going to bake out a height map PNG here. So I'm actually going to come over to my landscape, hit C, make that editable, and let's get this started to bake it out. And so in order to bake it out, I'm going to come down here inside of my materials browser. I'm just going to double click with my left mouse, and then that's going to make a material in here. And the only thing that I want to have check marked on is my luminance channel, in which I have right here. And so inside this texture palette right here, I'm going to click the down arrow, and I'm going to come over here to gradient, and that's going to bring up our gradient inside of our luminance channel here, in which I'm going to add the material to my landscape right now, so we can start seeing the stuff as it's happening, as I'm starting to manipulate this. And so next, what I'm going to do is actually right here, right where it says the texture, you have like this little down arrow that's kind of hidden here. I'm going to left click and bring that down. And then down here where it says type, instead of 2D-U, I'm going to go to 2D-V, just like that. And then right here, I want to do some more stuff with this gradient. There's another arrow right here. I'm going to left click, bring this down, and I actually want to change out the interpolation here. But you can see if it's grayed out, it's as easy as just coming back over to your gradient, kind of just like click on this and drag it over a little bit. And then that's going to activate everything in here, in which for my interpolation, I actually want to bring it down to linear. And all this stuff is going to make sense here in a moment as I keep going through this. And so what I'm going to do now is actually hit Control D on my keyboard. And down here in the lower right hand corner, you can see this attributes window popped up with the project. And what I'm going to do here is come down here to where it says color management, linear workflow. I'm going to click that off. And that changed out my color space here a little bit. Let me check my notes real quick. So luminance, cycles off. That's what I wanted to do. So come over here, scroll down here to cycles. And I'm going to click this one off as well. And then 2D, interpolation, linear. And I want to do projection right here. So I'm going to click back on my material, and where it says projection, instead of UVW mapping, I'm going to come down here and do projection flat, I believe. There we go. So now you can see inside the crevices and stuff like that, we're starting to pull in some height data. And so the white areas will be like the peak of the landscape. And then like the further black it gets, that's going down below sea level. But I don't have anything in here that is too low. So you're starting to see it a little bit gray in here. Actually, let me hit Control D, go back to linear workflow. Yeah, okay, so the landscape isn't that deep. But this is basically the height data that we're going to pull out of here from Cinema 4D. And so what I want to do now is come over to landscapes. Then I want to come over to tags. I'm going to come down here to material tags, and I'm going to click on this one that says bake material. And then from here, I'm just going to probably just bake it to like my desktop or something. So where it says file name, I clicked on the folder, come over here to desktop and click on save. And then for my format, I'm going to come down here to PNG. Like so. And then for my color depth, I'm going to do the highest I could do right now, which is 16-bit. And for width and height, I'm just going to make this 4K. So 4096 by 4096. And this is going to bake out a 4K texture for us. And then if I come over here to options, we have some different parameters down here with these boxes. The only one I want to check on is luminance, because that's the only parameter that we have inside our material that we're going to bake out. And so down here at the very bottom, we can actually hit preview, and it's going to give us a preview of what our height map is going to look like. And I mean, that looks pretty decent right there. So if you're happy with how it's going to look, all you basically have to do is hit bake, and you can see it working down here inside this little material preview box. But then if I go over to my desktop here, it should have baked it out, in which, there we go. So now I have a height map in here. Yeah, let's see how it looks inside of Unreal. I'm just doing this all off the cuff. And so what we're going to do is actually use this to create like the background landscape, because right now all we have is like our hero here, our hero hill inside of here, and we have nothing going on in the backdrop. So this is going to be strictly for backdrop imagery, just so we don't have like infinite plane going on. And so right here inside of Unreal Engine 5, I'm going to click on select mode, and then I'm going to come down here to landscape. And then right here, I'm going to click import the file. And this is where we're going to actually be able to bring in that height data. And so I know there's different ways of making terrains. Like I know some people like using Gaia because that's node based. One of my favorites is World Creator. That's a really good one for making terrains. But if you want something quick and dirty, this is an easy way to do it right out of Cinema 4D. And it's super simple, as I showed you there. And so I'm actually going to bring in this landscape luminance channel, which is our height map. And this, I'm going to hit fit the data just to see what it does. And so if you look here, you can actually see like a wireframe of what this terrain is actually going to look like. And instead of doing 255 quadrants, because we're kind of making like a cinematic scene, we're not making a game level, so I don't need that many polygons. This is just going to be for backdrop imagery. And so for my section size, I'm actually going to bring this down to 31 quads because we don't need that much geometry. For me, whenever I'm working on cinematics, I always say less is more. You don't really need hyper detailed stuff that's only going to be for a backdrop. And so now what I'm going to do is actually just click import and give us a second to import a hill. And there we go. So now that height map data that I did inside of Cinema 4D, now it just made like this massive terrain that we have inside of Unreal. We you see like a bunch of polygon big blocks there, and that's because I did 31 quadrants. Again, I'm only using this for background imagery, so I'm actually going to populate this for like trees and grass and things of that nature. So all this is going to get completely covered. I only basically used it for shape and geometry, but you can see it's kind of clipping like my little hero scene that I have right here. So I'm going to come over to some of my sculpting tools, much like Steve showed you in ZBrush there. We have sculpting tools for our terrain and everything. So I actually like using this one. Where's erosion at? I'm going to click on erosion, and I'm just going to wipe some of this away, but I'm actually going to make my brush maybe a little bit smaller. So let's see, brush size. I'm going to bring this down like so. And I'm just going to start clipping away at some of my terrain here, just so it's not overpopulating my scene there. So something like that should be good. And then I think that's going to be it for the terrain there. So now that I have my terrain, I have my backdrop, everything in here, I think the next thing I'm going to show you guys will be vertex painting, in which I'm going to go back into Cinema 4D because there's a way that we have to export this out to be able to do vertex painting on it. So if you guys followed along yesterday, this hillside that we have in here, this was built with the landscape, much like how I just showed you right now, but this was brought over with the Datasmith plugin. And so the Datasmith plugin brought in everything that I did inside of Cinema 4D yesterday, in which, let me go back here to landscape. I didn't see that, it was clipping my bridge here, so just going to paint this down like so. Okay, there we go. So back to what I was saying. So yeah, when we brought in our entire scene yesterday, everything was brought in with the Datasmith plugin. But just in my experimentation, I found out like whenever you want to do like just like painting on top of your geometry inside of Unreal Engine 5, it has to come in as an FBX. Like it doesn't work with this landscape that I just showed you. It doesn't work with importing Datasmith. You have to export it out as an FBX. And so what I'm going to do is actually just replace this green hillside that I made right here with an FBX that I'm going to export out as Cinema 4D. So I'm going to go back to like my original scene that I built yesterday inside of Cinema, and I don't have to like delete anything in here. I basically just have to select my hillside here. So let me make sure that I have my hill selected here, which would be landscape. I'm going to hit C just to make it editable, just so we have the UV maps that's going to come over as well. And so from here, I'm going to come over to File and come down to Export. I'm going to come down to Export FBX. And this is really important here because I have an entire scene here, but the only thing I want to export out is the landscape. And so we do have a selection inside our attributes box here that says selection only. So as long as you have that check marked on, the stuff that you have selected in your outliner here on the right hand side will be the only stuff that will export out as an FBX, which is really cool. And then another thing that's important too is right here under animation, I want to make sure I have tracks clicked off because I don't have any animation. I'm just bringing over a single geometry. And so everything else looks up to par. I'm just going to click OK. And then let's say I want to name this one SIGGRAPH Hill version 2. So that exported out at FBX, in which I could bring back into Unreal Engine. So I might actually just make a separate folder for it. I'm going to right click down here inside of my content drawer, make a new folder. I'm just going to name this folder FBX just to keep things organized. Double click on that. And then if I come over to my Windows Explorer, let me find where I just recently created that FBX data. So I believe it's in this folder. Look by date. Yep, there we go. It's SIGGRAPH Hill version 2. I'm going to click and drag that into here. And then it's going to bring up our FBX import options. And so right now, like with the new Unreal Engine 5, you can bring in FBXs and have it automatically convert over to nanite, which is the new thing. Too much to get into for this demonstration. Like nanite's like its whole different talk in itself, but make sure you don't have nanite clicked on, because then the vertex painting won't work if you make this into a nanite geometry. So I would just leave everything as the default here and just click import all and give us a second to import here. Okay, so it looks like my hill is imported. So I'm actually going to use this hill to get rid of this hill right here. So I can actually delete this hill, and then I'm just going to click and drag that FBX into my scene. And then I don't even have to try to like place it or anything. It should automatically just zero out at the coordinates, because if you're following along yesterday, that was a big proponent of something I was showing yesterday. Like, as long as you work in coordinates of 0, everything will line back up once you bring it into Unreal. And it looks like maybe some of my steps kind of got out of place too. Then I see a little bit of clipping here as well. And the cool thing is, like, we built these steps inside of Cinema 4D using the cloner right here. So if you guys remember, I used this cloner object to bring over all the steps into Unreal, but like there's no cloner or anything inside of Unreal Engine 5. And so what it does whenever it starts translating and bringing everything into Unreal, it brings it into as its own separate piece of geometry, which we could go further in and manipulate like so. So if you have any type of clipping or anything like that, you could just manually come in here and start manipulating your geometry, which I just saw there was like a little bit of clipping happening here. So I just want to move that over a little bit. And then maybe these steps that seem to be floating right here, maybe I'll just pull these down a little bit. Not sure why they started floating. And plus I could just cover this with some geometry, but I'm just going to move some of these down like so in the meantime. And then I'm going to go over the Megascans, and I'm going to start populating my scene here with some grass from Megascans and some cobblestones as well, in which we're going to do all just painting in. That's what I was getting prepped for. But first, I just want to move these steps down. So let me move these down. Just a couple more here. Almost finished. And there we go. So I'm just going to move these down just so they're clipping inside of our hillside a little bit, because we're going to cover this with grass. But first, let's come over and do some Megascan materials. So I'm going to come down here to my content drawer, and I have some materials already downloaded. So you can see here, I have a Megascans folder. I downloaded some surfaces as 4K materials just because I didn't want to do that while we're here doing a demonstration. It looks like since I pulled them off my drive, we're not seeing what they are right here, but they should still work. And so what I'm going to do is actually right here under search, I want to type in INST, and that's going to pull up all the instances of the materials that I have here, and which the instances is what we downloaded from the Megascans library. Well, which I downloaded, but I did that previously just because I wasn't sure how the internet was going to be working. But I know what these materials are. Like, this is going to be like my grass patch that has some clovers in it. And then I have like a stone floor that has a little bit of grass in between it. And I'm going to mix these two together by painting them. And so you want to do this one in order of operation of the, like your base layer, you want to select first. And then you hold down the control. Whatever you want to paint on top of it, you want to select that one second. So I'm going to hold down the control, left click, and select that. Oh, it looks like it's starting to pop in a little bit here. And then I have a third material, but I don't think I'm going to use that because I'm going to paint in mud puddles instead, which I'll show you how to set that up. So I'm going to stick with just selecting these two materials right here. And then in order to get this to paint onto my hillside, I have to come up here where we have like this little cube with the plus symbol. I'm going to come down here to where it says Quixel Bridge. And Quixel Bridge is how we access all of our Megascans and everything. And so I already have my Megascans downloaded. Let me make sure I make this full screen so you can see it. And so in order to get to like the Megascans blending, it's a little bit weird, but you have to make sure you select like a material, which is the grass patch that I previously downloaded. But you select the material just so you can get access to this little box down here. The icon might be a little bit hard to see, but we have like 3 lines with 3 little circles on there. You want to select that, and that's going to bring up this Megascans attribute window, which is going to create our blend material. And so everything that we had selected inside of our content browser there, make sure you have that still selected. You just want to click create material blend, and it's going to do all the background node work for us, and we don't have to go into do any type of blueprints or anything like that, because Megascans is going to handle that for us. So if I come back down here now to my content drawer, we should have a folder that says blend materials, which we do right here. And I'm just going to click and drag this onto my hillside, and then we're going to go in and do some manipulation on this. But first, let me save my scene, because it's always good to save just in case. So I'm going to save selected. And I'm just going to name this one SIG 22. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is actually double click on this material, and I'm going to attempt to show you guys what's happening in the viewport while doing it inside of my materials attribute here. This is where like dual monitors really helps out, because I want to show you guys what's like happening with our materials in here in real time as I'm manipulating it. But first, what I'm going to do is come over here to where it says blend materials. I'm going to select the top layer and the base layer. And then right here where it says global, actually, let me make this full screen so it's easier to see. I'm going to come right here and select the base layer and middle layer. I don't have a top layer because I only did 2 materials, but I'm going to do a puddle layer because we can also like paint on like different weight or wet attributes onto our scene to make like mud puddles or just make it look a little bit more wet, which is really cool. And so I'm going to come down here and first do the tiling of my base layer, which if I look down here, we have base layer tiling offset. I'm going to select this, and then okay, so now let me try to do this by showing you guys here in the viewport. So for my tiling, let's say we start by 10 by 10, which that's not looking too bad right there. Maybe let's try 15 by 15. There we go. So something like that is looking pretty cool. And you guys notice like I'm using like a photoreal material, and I'm going to show you guys how we can make this into like a toon shading look after we get everything finished. But since I have that on there, I'm going to come over here to mode selected, and I'm going to come down here to mesh paint, and then right here where I have my path of these stones, I'm going to paint like some dirt cobblestones underneath this just to give it a little bit more like realism, I guess you would say in there, because usually if you have like stones here, you're going to have a little bit of debris and a little bit of grunge happening under there. So what I'm going to do is click on my paintbrush, and then down here we have these color painting channels, in which the red channel will be our middle layer. Like yeah, I think the red channel is our middle layer, and then right here where it says paint color, you want to make sure that this is black. So I'm just going to click this to invert it, because if you have it as white, that's going to erase, but if you have it as black, that's how you paint on. And so it's as easy as making sure I have my thing selected. Actually, I think I should have had my hillside selected first. So let me go back to selection, select my hillside, come back here under mesh paint, come here under paint. So now you can see I'm just painting on that texture like so. And it's a little bit hard on the sides, but we can easily go through my attributes window, and I can start to just start making that blend here on the sides, so everything looks a little bit more coherent. And plus that texture is extremely large, so I'm going to have to go through and do some tiling on that one as well. So I'm going to go back to my blend material here, come down here to where it says middle layer, and then right here where it says middle tiling, let's make this one tiling of X and Y at 15 by 15 as well. You can start seeing we have some of our cobblestones in here, which maybe let's make them a tad bit smaller. See, 20 by 20. Let's go 30 by 30. Something like that should be suffice. And then you can see we have some really hard edges in here. I'm going to manipulate maybe some of the fall off just to kind of make this blend a little bit better. So come over here into my attributes window. Let me see if I remember where it's at here. So I have my tiling control. Yep, it's going to be this one right here. So where it says blend amount, maybe let's start with 5. I guess it didn't like that one, so maybe it was the other one. So let me do base. There we go. All right, so it was, if I go to my base, my middle, and I actually do blend contrast, let me start with 3. And we can see that we're starting to get some of our fall off from our bottom material onto our cobblestones, just so we're starting to just kind of blend it in a little bit better. Maybe that's a bit too much. Maybe if I do like 2.5, somewhere around there. blend them out 3. And so we're starting to see some of our grass patches starting to blend through our material here. So you can really go in here and start really fine-tuning this how you see fit. The more blend contrast we have, the more it's starting to blend between our stones here and everything, which I always thought was really cool, because now we could get like a more detailed, finite look for the look that we're going for. And so let's say that we're happy with that for right now. I'm just going to click on save, and we're actually going to paint some foliage on here with our foliage brush. And so maybe let's start with some grass, because we want to start having some grass just kind of fill all this in, so we're not strictly relying on the texture here. Plus the wind is going to be wind dynamic, and so it's going to be moving with the wind and the breeze and everything. And so I do have some grass that's already pre-made that I can start using with the foliage tool here. So if I come down to my stylized forest pack, if I come down here to mesh, and actually let me exit that out. Let's see, we have plants. So I'm going to use these this grass right here, but first I have to come up here to select mode, come down here to foliage, and I like calling this my Bob Ross tool, because this is how I can paint in on my happy little trees and all that stuff of that nature. So show you guys here in a minute what I'm talking about. I'm just going to grab and drag the foliage in here that I want to start painting on here, and let me make the brush size a little bit smaller, because you can see like it's engulfing our entire hill right here, but I want to be a little bit more precise. So everything that we have inside of this big sphere here is going to paint onto our landscape there. So let me come down here and manipulate some of these attributes first. So maybe for density, let's do like 1,000, and I want to change the brush size. Maybe let's start with 30, something like that. And then I will also want to make sure that I change my normals so that, yeah, so right here where it says align to normal, like let me show you, if I paint on like this curvature of my hillside right now, it's going to make it look unnatural, because it's actually going to be tilting with the curvature of my landscape there. But if I come over here and hit align to normal, it's going to be going straight up and down. And that's how foliage is in nature. Like, I don't know if you guys notice, like even on hillsides, trees always grow straight up and down vertical, same with plants and everything there. And so you want to make sure we have this looking as natural as possible. But I believe when I was painting this on, it looked like it was hovering above my geometry, so I could probably even make it sink into my geometry a tad bit more. So let me look for where I have like my Z, yeah, my Z offset. So I'm not going to go too crazy, maybe like -1. Let me paint it in there. So that's looking pretty good right there. Maybe I could have some variety inside of my plant tools and everything here. So I don't want this scale to be even all the way. If I come over here to where it says scale X, maybe let's do like 0.6, and then max we could do 0.8, and that should give us a little bit of variety inside of the sizing of our grass, because it's all going to be randomized in here when you're out in nature. And let's say I want to maybe have the density be a little bit more, because I want to engulf this entire area here. So I'm gonna move my paint density instead of 0.5 up to 1, and let's start painting this entire hillside right here. So after I'm done just kind of finite painting on my grass in here, I'm actually going to add some trees in here as well, and then we're going to go in and we're going to add some water, and then we're going to go back into Cinema 4D and probably add a character in here as well. If we have enough time, I'll show you guys how we can bring camera, or not camera, but character animation from Cinema 4D into Unreal Engine 5. I'm probably only going to paint grass on the front hillside, because we're not going to see the back again, but this is only a cinematic. And so if this was like an actual game level that I was building out, I would make sure that I paint like my entire terrain, because you know the player would be going through everything in the scene. But for cinematics, you pretty much only want to worry about what you're going to see in camera. At least that's the way that I like to work, because I don't think you unnecessarily want to put a bunch of geometry in your scene. So something like that I think should be suffice. And so now let's add some trees into our scene as well, in which I'm going to go down here and I have a tree pack in here as well. So I'm going to probably select 3 trees, because you can actually paint on as many different objects that you have in there as well. Like, it's not only foliage, you can do objects as well. So let me select like these trees. It's called the foliage tool because people usually use it to paint foliage, but I mean, you can paint on anything you want, much like the scatter tool inside of Cinema 4D. But I'm going to come down here and just manipulate some of these attributes I don't want to have as many trees. I just want to kind of add some just to kind of hide some of the backdrop in here and then give us some cool dynamic lighting once we get into the lighting portion of it. But let me see. I want to change my X scale. Let's say to like 0.5. Let's do 0.8 again. For my Z offset, I do 0.1. And then again, my line of normal, make sure I click that off so the trees are upright. And that might be a little bit too many trees. So my paint density, maybe let's change this down to 0.5. Yeah, let's do a 0.2 maybe. So I don't want to have them really bunched up. I just wanted them to be a little bit sporadic. So I'm going to change this density down to like 30 maybe. There we go. So it's giving us not as many trees. Okay, so last one. Let's try 50. Because I really just want to paint. All right, so it's acting up now. Oh, I did 650. So that's why it's giving us so much. So, okay, cool. So do something like that. And I'm going to go up really high. Maybe just come over here to the back end and paint some trees back here. I really just want to kind of blend this all together and hide some of that backdrop. Even though I did add a landscape back there, I think it looks cooler when you see it kind of going through the trees and everything. And if you look, all my trees are already set up to be working dynamically with the wind, and they're working in unison with my grass down here as well, which I think is really cool. So something like this might be suffice. So yeah, I think I'm going to leave it like this in the time being. And then also, maybe if I look through my camera that I animated inside of Cinema, let's see what it's looking like instead of our viewport. It's always good just to kind of get a reference of how your scene's looking. So it's like we're coming over the bridge, we're getting some cool dynamic shadows and everything. And so I know at this point, maybe I want to put some trees over here just to cover some of this stuff up as well. So I'm actually going to select my background here. Come back over here to foliage. And I'm just going to place like a tree or two, because then I'm going to go back into my overhead and start painting them in. But I want to just give myself a point of reference of where I want to start painting trees at. So let's say I want to do trees back here as well, because I just really want to make it seem like there's like a vast forest, but also cover all this through. So I'm going to go back out on my camera. And the reason I'm doing this, because the foliage tool doesn't always work correctly when you're looking at like a camera perspective, but especially when you bring in the camera from like another DCC. So I kind of just use it as like a point of reference, and then I go and just start painting my stuff in like so. So now let's look back through my camera here. It's something like that. Looks pretty good. So actually, let me add a material to my landscape as well. I did make a generic grass material, a Cinema 4D here, that I'm just going to drag and drop. It's just like the basic green material. So I think I have it under my C4D scene, geometry. Yeah, there we go. So grass, I'm just going to drag and drop that into here. Make sure I'm on select mode. I might have to do it inside my raw outliner. So let me see. I'm going to dock this. Make sure I have my landscape selected. Start scrolling down. Okay, so landscape material. There we go. So I was going to do water, but just looking at the time, I think I'm going to go back into Cinema 4D and do some of the mocap stuff instead, because I know that's a big question that I get a lot from the community. A lot of people always ask me, like, how do you bring in mocap data, especially when you're using like Mixamo and stuff like that from Cinema 4D into Unreal Engine. It's real easy to set up. So let me get back into Cinema 4D and do this one instead. So I'm going to start a new section here and make sure I hit Control D, because I'm going to make sure my FPS is at 24. I'm going to come up here, make sure my FPS is at 24. And since I'm going to be exporting out FBX data, it doesn't really matter what resolution I'm working in. I just want to make sure my frame rate is concise. And so I'm going to pull in this generic knight character that we had gotten from Mixamo actually. So he's all rigged up and everything with Mixamo already. He kind of just fits the scene because he's already a knight. We're building like a knight scene in there. The materials look a little bit muddy. Let me actually double click on my material. Come down here to viewport. let me see. So I usually copy and paste it. Yes. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to come down here to my viewport, and then where it says texture preview size, instead of default, let's hit 4K. That should make everything look a lot more sharp inside of Cinema 4D here, and which it does. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is, like, I have my Mixamo skeleton here at the top, and then I have auto geometry here as well. I'm just going to select it top to bottom, hold down the shift key, left click, select everything, right click, and then I'm just going to group my object here, and I'm just going to name it night. And then from here, I'm actually going to come over to tags, and we have some rigging tags here, which is going to pull the Mixamo skeleton data out, and so we don't have to do any type of like white painting or anything like that. Basically, I'm just going to match the joints and everything to the mocap data that's already inside the asset browser inside of Cinema 4D. And in order to do that, we want to come over here to where it says character definition. I'm going to click on this, and let me drag this up so we can see it better. And I'm going to click open manager, and then I just want to extract a skeleton. And you can see, like, it added all the joints and everything already. So this is a reason why I like using Mixamo skeletal systems, because it's already set up inside of Cinema 4D to extract a skeleton. There's no guesswork. Like, if you do it from other programs, sometimes you have to go in here and manually, like where it says hip, you'd have to go find like the hip joint and drag it in. I mean, it's possible, but when you use a Mixamo, it makes it extremely easy. And so what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to go to the asset browser and actually pull some motion capture data from Cinema 4D and align it to my character. I know a lot of people, at least I don't think they know, that there's actually a big motion capture library inside of Cinema 4D. Like, I often see a lot of people using the same Mixamo dances and stuff like that, but you do have like a whole plethora of different mocap data that's already inside of Cinema. Like, you have it already kind of organized in different folders. You have like clapping animations, you have climbing, crawling, you even have like dying and stuff like that. So you see like this little arrow here. Like, if you wanted to grab this mocap data, you would just download it from the server there, and then you could just double click it and drag it into your character. So what I'm going to do is actually use the stretching one, because I already have it downloaded. I'm just going to double click on it, and you can see a skeletal system popped into my scene right here. He's a little bit smaller than my character, but that's okay, because we're only going to be translating the joint data from the mocap data to my character Mixamo skeletal rig there. So if I go back to object here, you can see that we already have a character definition tag on that mocap data. So everything's already done for us. The only thing we have to do is click and drag it, drop it basically onto our knight. But to do that, I'm going to click on the character definition on my knight, come down here to where it says create solver. I'm going to select this, and then right here where it says source character, I want to make sure that I keep this selected here. So I'm going to left click and hold right where it says stretching. I'm going to grab that tag, drag it down here, and then now we should have the mocap data on our character there, which I'm not sure how long this information is. Let me go into my animation tab. So it's about, I say like 195 frames. So I'm going to make my scene 195 frames. Click standard. And we're just going to play it through. So now you can see we have the Cinema 4D motion capture like working on a character, and it was easy as that. So it's basically pulling in just all the positional data from the joints and putting it onto our character there, which is really simple and easy to use. Like, if anybody's watched my mocap channel or my YouTube channel, I do a lot of mocap with like Rococo and Xscenes and stuff, and that's my workflow for doing it there. But if you want some quick and dirty and easy mocap that you just want to kind of put on your character, you have a whole plethora of stuff inside your asset library. So let's say we want to bring this into Unreal Engine. I'm going to select only my knight. So this is going to be like how I did with the FBX before. You want to make sure that you only select what you want to output. I don't want to select this up here, only my knight geometry. So I want to click on my knight node that I made right here. I'm going to come over to file, come down here to export, and I'm going to export out FBX. And so again, you want to make sure that you have selection only selected right here. And I want to make sure that I have animation, because I do have an animation track now. So I want to do animation tracks. I don't have to do bound by joints only. I'm not sure what that does, but usually when I just select this one, it's usually fine. So file format version 7.7, which is 2019. I'm going to click OK. Then I'm just going to save this. I'm going to just name this one, let's say stretch. And I'm going to click save. And I exported it out quick and easy. So now I'm going to go over to Unreal. And I'm going to come over here. And I'm actually going to make another folder. So let me drag this up. Got like a lot of folders going on in here. I'm going to right click, come over here to new folder. And I'm just going to name this one maybe character, because I'm bringing in a character. Double click on that. And then I could go to my Windows Explorer, find where I have my FBX that I just exported out of Cinema 4D. Left click and drag it into my content browser. And that's going to bring up another FBX window, but this one is different because we're actually going to bring in a skeletal mesh on this one. And so for here, the most important thing that you want to do is click on import animation, which I'm going to select that. And then for animation length, I'm just going to do exported time, which should be fine. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I needed to select there. And I think we're pretty good. So yeah, that was the most important thing. You want to make sure that you import the animation, or else it's just going to come in as a T-pose. So I'm going to leave everything else as default. I'm going to click import all. Give us a second. Then I'm going to exit this window. And now we have our night down here. It's going to take a second to prepare the shaders, but I believe it's going to be this one that I drag into my scene. So I'm going to click and drag the night into my scene now. Let me make this window a little bit smaller. And I think I'm looking through my camera. Let me get out of my camera view. And there we go. So now I have my night in my scene, and we're going to have to do one more step to get this to animate, because right now he's just in his beginning position. But if I had actually, go through my timeline, you can see he's actually not animated, and that's because we have to tell Unreal to pull in that animation data that we just exported out of Cinema 4D. So I'm going to just maybe have him standing at like the foot of the bridge, maybe something like this. So he should be in a good position right there. And so I'm going to actually I'm going to come over to my Raw Outliner, take the character here, left click, drag it into my sequencer, which is the timeline. And then I'm going to make sure I'm on my first frame. And right here where it says animation, you want to click on the plus symbol, animation. And this is going to bring in our animation sequence from Cinema 4D. So I'm going to click on this. And then you can see he kind of disappeared. I'm not sure why it always does this. Like, it usually drops them down to like a 90-degree angle whenever you bring them in with that information. But all you have to do is come over here to rotation, and I believe bring this one up 90 degrees on the red. And so now when I play through, okay, and so now we have a character animation inside of Cinema 4D, brought over all the animation, all the deformation, all the textures and everything. So now if I look through my camera, just let this play out. Now you can see we have our scene going over the bridge. We have the night there. He's stretching out. Then he disappeared because we didn't have that much in there. So I can actually drag this out. You see, so just let it keep playing. Let this one play out. And yeah, so that's how we bring character information into Cinema 4 or into Unreal Engine from Cinema 4D. And yeah, I think that's going to be it. I guess we could do one more thing to bring in the toon shading. I know I promised water, but we don't have enough time for that. So what I'm going to do is actually show you guys just quick and easy how we could do some toon shading. So I'm going to come over here to my content browser. This is actually a cool plugin. I wish I remembered the guy's name. I should have asked him what his name was, but I'm going to actually, no. What I'm going to do, I forgot, Magic Bullet Looks, right? All right, let's do some Magic Bullet Looks instead. So a lot of people don't realize that we have Magic Bullet inside of Unreal Engine, in which, courtesy of Simon, I went and figured it out last night how to bring this in. So I will show you guys how to bring Magic Bullet Looks into Unreal Engine 5, and then I think we'll call it a day. And so what I'm going to do is basically, let me show you how to activate it first. So I'm going to come up here to edit, come down here to plugins. And if you're inside your plugins window, all you have to do is type in, it should be Magic. There we go. I don't know why I put MBL, but yeah, so Magic, you're going to see that we have Magic Bullet Looks version 16, which is the latest suite number. And so I already have it activated. And the cool thing is, what I noticed was, if I type in C4D and I actually activate the Datasmith C4D importer, it automatically activated Magic Bullet Looks with it. So it's kind of one of those 2-for-1 punches. And now from here, all I have to do, I'm going to come down here to where it says Place Actors Panel, because that's going to bring up a search panel here on the side, which makes it a little bit easier to search for some of the volume stuff. So I'm going to type in Magic, and that brings in our Magic Bullet Looks volume, in which I could click and drag into my scene here. And let me get rid of that. And let me zero out my Magic Bullet so I can find it. There we go. So we have a volume block. Now the cool thing about like a Magic Bullet volume block is, especially for like gaming and stuff like that, like this volume will encapsulate everything that you do inside of Magic Bullet. So let's say like I did a live stream with Max on last year where I showed like a video game level that I made, and once I went inside the volume, it completely changed the look and feel of the world and everything using the LUTs from the Magic Bullet pack. But let me just show you quickly how to activate it, because I know we're running out of time here. So I'm actually going to make this larger just so it engulfs our entire scene. And then I still have my Magic Bullets volume selected. If I scroll down here, we should have a button to activate Magic Bullet Looks, which I do. I have right here. So it's going to say Open Magic Bullet Looks. Give us a second to open up. Okay, so it's pulling it through. I think maybe because I'm doing live streaming from my laptop and I have a bunch of stuff open. Usually what you're going to see inside of here is going to work just like Magic Bullet Looks inside of like Premiere or After Effects or Cinema 4D. Like you would see your scene inside your viewport. Again, I think it's because I'm streaming. Maybe it's just an overload on my laptop here, but it just still works. So maybe I'll just pull one of my favorite LUTs from Magic Bullet and you guys can see it happening inside of Unreal. So let me see. I usually like, what is it? Blockbuster. Cool. Let's do Classic Invasion. So normally you would see your scene in here and then you would just click check mark, and that's going to change your scene based on that Magic Bullet selection that you have. So now you can see it could plane or it changed the complete outlook of my scene there. And I'll probably cover this more on my YouTube channel, just a little bit more in depth, and you guys can see exactly how I would use it. But yeah, that was just a quick and dirty, easy way of showing you guys how you can use Magic Bullet Looks live in real time inside of Unreal Engine 5. And I think that's going to do it. Yeah. No, I could talk all day, but
that's fantastic stuff, Wimbush. It's interesting on Magic Bullet that we were having a chat about that yesterday, about why would you do that, and then you were saying it saves so much time, so you don't have, if you want to change the color of an environment that your character walks into, you don't have to code it. You just set up the volume and just change the color. Yeah,
no blueprinting or anything. Like I know in the past, especially like game developers, like one of my favorite games is like Far Cry, and there's this scene where you're burning down like a weed field, basically. And when you're burning down the weed field, everything gets hazy. And the way they built that was with the volume. Like, as soon as you burn down the weed field, it activated the volume to make everything hazy. But with, like, Magic Bullet, you can actually just go in there, no blueprint or anything, and you can still get that type of reaction out of there. So
fantastic.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Saving on setup, getting multiple iterations, trying different things out in the games. So you could use it for development as well as playback. That's interesting.
Yeah, and cinematic renders as well. So if there's some type of thing, like if I would have set up like a cave scene in here, and we go and move the camera into the scene, as soon as the camera crosses that volume, we could change the complete outlook of how the inside of the scene or inside the cave looks.
Fantastic. I used to know those as cut scenes, 20 years ago.
Yeah,
Cinematic renders is the new one. Absolutely.
We don't do cut scenes no more. So
that's right.
We just make it happen.
We did have a couple of questions about the kit, inevitably. So you were talking about working with Unreal, and Manuel was asking what sort of laptop would you recommend, and then that led on to a couple of other comments about GPUs, for working with Unreal.
Yeah, like I don't want to get specific laptops because nobody's sponsoring me right now. So, but no, I mean any like mid-level gaming laptop or PC, you should be suffice to run it. I know like on my home system, I'm still using like a 2080 Ti, which is a couple generations back, and then actually I have another computer where I'm using an AMD It's like an AMD graphics card from like 4 years ago, and it still runs on there as well. So like Unreal will work on, you know, AMD and NVIDIA, which is really dope.
Does the frames per second make a difference? Because I think you set it up on 24, didn't you?
Yeah.
But would it make a difference if you're doing on 60, say?
I mean, I particularly like working at 60, but I know that's the big argument, like 60 for gaming, 24 for like making it look more theatrical and cinematic. So that's why I did 24 here, but yeah, I use 60 all day.
Okay, fantastic.
So, yeah, it just depends on your preference of what you want to work in. Yeah.
Cool, excellent. So we are fast approaching the time, but what's interesting is you mentioned something at the beginning of our presentation about working with EJ, and we have EJ right here. Oh, he's run off, but he's up next. He's up next in a couple of minutes. Oh, he's hiding behind the scenes here. Yeah. So what we're going to do is that we'll have a short break, and then EJ is going to come on and do his presentation, but he's asked you to guest with him for a couple of minutes at the start because they want to talk about your special competition.
Yes.
So stick around for that, please. And
can I pull up my card real quick? Because I want everybody to follow me on YouTube. I know I over-prepared for this, so I didn't get exactly to get through everything, but I will cover the rest of the stuff as soon as I land back in the States here. So youtube.com/Jonathan Wimbush. I'll do a continuation. Actually, I'll do it from scratch. I'll build everything out, start to finish, and yeah, promise what I delivered. So
absolutely recommend looking at those things, because Wimbush is such an amazing educator and just making this real, because it's no pun intended, but the connection between these different technologies is something that isn't absolutely obvious. And even as you were pulling out here, some key things to look out for when you're doing it, something which might be a gotcha, but like, hey, here's how to do it, fix it, especially the zeroing and the axis work. So that's amazing stuff. So yeah, make sure you follow Wimbush on these channels, and thank you again for amazing presentation. Once again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. See you in a few minutes.